Hello and welcome to the Organized Nonsense Podcast. My name is Christian Broderick and I'm here with no one. Well, actually this episode is going to be a little different. This is a special episode where I'm here and then no one else is. But I have permission to upload this, so I technically had someone here to say that I could do this. Alright, might as well cut the whole opening thing because basically from the title of the video you know what this is about already, and if I'm going to be stuttering throughout this entire video. I'm not doing any sort of script here because I think, considering how much I'm going to be talking about, that's just detrimental to the point. That, and well, I don't really have time to write a script because well, as you've been hearing throughout a lot of the podcast videos, my family likes to show up and tell me to can it whenever I'm recording, even though that's, you know, there's no reason to do that. I'm recording, but enough of that. So basically, Ratchet and Clank discussion. Now, I was supposed to be doing this with Sean Reedy, as we call him, but he had other plans, in a sense. I'll just not complain, but you know, basically, I'm going to be doing this. It's a little retrospective in its sense, because thanks to the fact that he's not here, I can talk more about my experiences and not him, just him. But yeah, Ratchet and Clank, like, I go way back. I mean, in terms of going back, in terms of gaming itself, right around the start was the PS2, because I played a bit of the GameCube. I had a PS1 for a short amount of time, even though around the time I got my PS1, the PS2 was out for about a year at that point. Because, well, I was born in 1999. That was about 2 years before the PS1, you know, was replaced by its successor. So when I got my PS2, I got Jak 2, which, you know, explains why I don't despise that game, and I got Sonic Heroes, which explains why I don't despise that game either. But one of the first games I deliberately asked for, because when I got my PS2, I didn't ask for that console or the games that came with it, but the game I did ask for was Ratchet and Clank. Well, Ratchet and Clank 2 to be specific, because I saw that game pre-owned in the GameStop. I looked at the box is going to be different for our American viewers, but the European box basically just had, like, Ratchet holding a gun and Clank looking at the screen very, I don't know, aggressively, I guess. And then on the back of the box it had Ratchet, like, riding the hover bike, and I wanted to play that. I wanted to play that. So yeah, that's cool. I love the game. It was new. It was because I remember specifically how shocked I was when I killed enough enemies, my health increased, and it's like, what the fuck? I can increase health. And you know, when the same thing happened to my weapons, it was amazing. Because, you know, I hadn't played RPGs until, like, I was 14, so at that point anything that, like, had anything to do with XP, it was just a novel concept for me. I went on to buy Ratchet and Clank 3 like a week later. I hadn't even finished, like, I hadn't even got close to finish the second game at that point. I just wanted another one, because, you know, at that point anything to do with something that I thought was cool was just like, maybe I should buy this. But I got Ratchet and Clank 3, I liked that game, didn't even finish it, and I got Ratchet Gladiator like 2 years later. I liked that game, didn't even finish it. Well, actually, the game I got closest to finishing was Deadlocked, because I remember specifically getting to the end, because Deadlocked isn't a long game, nor is it a hard one, so even as a kid I could beat that fucking game. Like, Ratchet and Clank 2 and 3, they're great games, but 2 specifically had a problem where if you wasted money on these incredibly expensive but useless weapons, you're kind of fucked. Like, Ratchet and Clank 2 has a problem of making you try to buy all these obsolete weapons, because there's a certain curve in the game where suddenly enemies have a lot more health around Planet Tabora, and you need to start buying like things like the bouncer and the mega rocket gun, because, well, they do more damage. But yeah, in terms of going back to when I was picking up the games, Size Matters I did pick up through a very odd trade. Like, I wasn't friends with many kids around my area, but there was this one kid. He had a PSP, and he had Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. Recently, I got, like, off a relative, this Mortal Kombat game that I could not give a rat's ass about for the PSP. So I was at this kid's place, and I was like, "Oh, you have Ratchet and Clank? I like Ratchet and Clank. Here, take this." And he was all like, "Oh, sure, okay, I'll take this, and you can take this." And I was at home now with Ratchet and Clank, which I could play anywhere. You know, that's a novel concept to me because, you know, I like it. I like Ratchet and Clank, and I could play it anywhere now. And then things started to go wrong. When I was a kid, I remember, like, this was a horrifying moment for me. When I got to, see, Size Matters had this level called Dreamtime. It was a very hallucinogenic, trippy place that did not belong in a game for kids in any sense. I can't remember the rating of Size Matters, but I'm pretty sure that situation in the game was horrifying. Like, Ratchet was kidnapped, he was unconscious, you were in his brain, and weird things were going on. Even the HUD was warped, and it was... It scared me to death. Like, I could not play a Ratchet and Clank game ever again after that. I traded the game back with the kid, and it took me until, like, 2011, after about a year, I got my PS3 to buy Crack in Time out of pure curiosity, because the cover was all like, "Is time run out for Ratchet and Clank?" And I was like, holy shit, what the fuck happened? I left the series, and now they're just going on this shit. And then I bought the game, and I just loved it. So, because at that point, I got rid of my PS2, and I got rid of all the games I had in my PS2, because, like, well, that wasn't too hard, because, besides, like, games that I could just buy in the PS3 again through HD remasters, I had a lot of shovelware for the PS2. Like, a lot of licensed games. I think a Hello Kitty game at one point. I think that was for my sister, but that didn't stop me from playing it. But, like, a lot of shovelware. My shelf was full of just lined up PS2 games on the cheap that I didn't play. So, like, getting rid of the PS2 and starting fresh with a new console was so much easier. But I bought Crack in Time, and I said, maybe I was unreasonable as a young 6-year-old, 7-year-old. Well, Size Matters came around in 2007. I must have bought it in, like 2009, 8. But yeah, I got Crack in Time, and I said, well, you know what? Why don't I get these back? And then I bought Tools of Destruction. I got the HD remasters. I bought All for One. We're gonna talk about that later. And I got into the Nexus. We're gonna talk about that later. And I got the PS4 game 2 months ago. Well, it came around in Ireland and the UK. It came out April 29th. That is over a month ago at this point. But so yeah, that is my position right now. If Reedy were here, he would talk about his experience, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. It was never clear, and like, this is just speculation. But whenever I brought up Ratchet and Clank, he just somehow knew what I was talking about, which made me assume he was the same fan as I was, but it just was an odd scenario. I never knew that he played those games. I just assumed that series was made for me specifically because no one else played them as far as I was aware. But, yeah, so... Well, actually, I forgot to mention how I got into Ratchet and Clank, because I did own Ratchet and Clank 1 for the PS1 at some point. I remember because I got a pre-owned copy of the game. It was scratched to death. Like, that game would hang on the loading screen so much. You know, Ratchet and Clank has these loading screens that Crack in Time did away with, where the ship just flies through space in different angles, and the ship spins and all this crap. It usually happens like 3 times before the loading screen completes. It goes over and over and over again when a loading screen hangs. It's really weird. But, yeah, like, Ratchet and Clank 1 for the PS2, I could barely play that game because of all the fucking scratches that disc had. And I couldn't bother my ass to, like, take it into, like, Game, who had these disc cleaners. I remember you paid a $5, they cleaned the disc, and it would work-ish. I did it to Jack Tree when I got that thing scratched it, and it worked well enough. But yeah, in terms of the games themselves, I remember because well, I suppose I should start Ratchet and Clank 1 because that game, for as little as I played, I remember being absolutely just ugh. The only reason I kept playing that game was because it had the name Ratchet and Clank on it. It was so different. That's what happens when you start with a second game in a series. But with Ratchet and Clank, it's especially glaring. You couldn't strafe, you had to move to aim. Everything was different. You only had 4 pieces of health, nothing upgraded, and fuck, it was just. And Ratchet, oh my god. Pre James Arnold Taylor Ratchet is not a Ratchet no one wants to go back to. But it wasn't fun. Even when I picked up the game for the HD remaster, finished it twice, I can't pick up that game ever again. 2, I consider that to be my second favorite just because it was the first one I played and because of how much it did. I mean, I'm going to complain often how the money gap in that game is so painful. I'm not going to have a fun time playing that game unless I stick with a couple of starting weapons until the weapons start getting good, because they try to sell you a lot of weapons that are only good for certain scenarios, but aren't good anywhere else. I save for the weapons that are good for all around situations. Tree was a lot better because you could test your weapons, something that I consider to be godly because you should be able to do that, find out if the weapon's shit or not, but also because it had less crap weapons. The entire concept of Ratchet and Clank is killing things, getting money, and buying things. That's basically how it works. The vendor is the most novel concept the entire series has. But in terms of Tree, well, Tree had something I absolutely adored. It was the save. If you had Ratchet and Clank 1 and 2 save files specifically at certain points in those games, you could get free shit. And I love that. If you had certain weapons from Ratchet and Clank 2 bought already, you could get them for free in Tree, and free weapons is always good. And you could also get, I think it was a 13% discount on all the weapons, which, trust me on this, saving the amount of money you need to spend on things is absolutely necessary at some point. I always use the discount because it just makes things go much faster. But in terms of Tree, it introduced the multiplayer. I played that with myself because local play was a thing. You didn't need the extensive, annoying cables to actually get it to work. I saw a lot of games that had has net play on them on the front of the box, but I never used it. I think Jack X had it, and Ratchet and Clank Tree and Deadlock had it, but when it was local, I used it on my own, plugged it in a second controller and saw what worked and saw what didn't. It was fun enough when I actually played it online with the PS3 version, just, Oh yeah, I brought this up in my review, I think, but, one guy, we were playing Capture the Flag on PS3 online, and he fucking got pissed at everyone. He started sending messages through PSN. Dude, you're playing Ratchet and Clank 3, not Call of Duty. Call of Duty. But, I was immensely confused as to why that would be even necessary. But Deadlocked had something very unique. The multiplayer was so broken in that game. I'm not talking about the online, of course. I'm talking about the cooperative play, where if a player dies, it takes 5 seconds for them to come back, and as long as the other player doesn't die, you have no idea how much that would break the final boss. But Deadlocked itself was kind of. I only like Deadlock for the dialogue. It's beautiful. The whole joke's about Vox, and Fox. The amount of, I remember specifically the focus test cutscenes and the ones involving the kids where they, the kids are praising Ratchet for his shit, and they're overdubbing what the kids are saying so they can like slanderize him even more. They even called Ratchet like a fucking crime boss at one point where he spilled an oil tanker on penguins. I don't know if Futurama was at that episode at that point, but I think that was what they were referencing. But yeah, besides that, Deadlocked had a mission system where, because Ratchet and Clank is more about going to planets, completing the sections, more like platforming, gunplay on planets, and then getting more planets to planet until you planet while you planet. Deadlock just has you do missions on various planets and get points and stuff. Nothing special. I honestly didn't think it meant that much. People like to call the game an expansion of the arena missions in the previous games, or more like 2 and 3, because Ratchet and Clank 1 didn't have those. I've never played that game again, by the way, but Deadlocked also had, it had a HD version. It was digital only, and while I was happy that version exists, because I'm not getting a PS2 anytime soon, it is riddled with bugs. Like, God, I can't... It is near Sonic 06 levels of bugs and cutscenes. And you think I'm joking, but it is impossible to play that game without some kind of glitch happening. Like, last time I played, the cutscenes were glitching out, the characters' models were staggering all the time, moving, and Vox is the most, like, his teeth glitch out of his mouth. It is amazing. It happens every time I play the game. But I remember our most recent glitch was, the skill points in Ratchet and Clank never mean anything unless you want to access pointless cheats. They're incredibly specific and guide-happy things that you need to complete if you want 100%. And you'll need a guide for them because some of them are impossible without a guide. But Deadlocked instead tells you what each skill point is and gives you money for them, which actually makes them have value in my book. But I remember because there was a glitch where the skill point on a planet that I haven't yet been on was unlocked. Even though this was a new, fresh save file, I couldn't have possibly been there earlier, and I couldn't have possibly gotten that skill point yet. So it didn't make any sense. But I can't talk about Size Matters, because I haven't played that game in a while, for good reason. I remember specifically, though, like, the unique things it brought was the armor system was set into parts. Like, you got pieces of the armor via exploring. Like, there was a fire armor helmet and ice armor helmet. You could put all together and get special effects and combine parts. That's a convenient... Not convenient, but, like, it's unique, I suppose. I don't remember too much besides that. But, Tools of Destruction. I've tried to play that game so much recently because I used to love that game. Because... I had Crack in Time, I lost Crack in Time, and I got it back. But in between that lost and got it back part, I had Tools of Destruction, and I used that game for my Ratchet and Clank fix. But, God, nowadays, there are so many other better Ratchet and Clank games to play, and Tools of Destruction does not rank very high among those anymore. Like, aesthetically, I think the game, in terms of concept, is... Well, the story is something I throw out the window immediately, because it tries to make this piece of shit named Percival as like some kind of hot shit villain that I'm supposed to give a crap about, and the whole you were the one Ratchet, you were the one Clank, Zony, blah blah, last Lombax, even though they retconned the other Lombax in this series from the PS2 games, it just put me to sleep very quickly. And like, as I've been playing the game more and more, the more I began to dislike like how some of the planets looked. And if there's one thing that I always hated in terms of design was Ratchet's armors. Like, look at Ratchet's armors. Look them up. They're awful in Tools of Destruction. Absolutely horrible. Like, there's one uniform where it's completely yellow, and then just the green part in the middle, and then the first armor is just this fucking ugly piece of shit that I can't even look at. And the last armor, it's just the laziest thing. But, yeah. Tools of Destruction also had an economy problem. Like, it was hard enough to get bolts in that game, and I didn't like the rare titanium system that they brought in. Like, I felt that, why would I need this? Why would I need an entirely separate currency to upgrade my weapons? I mean, 2 had that, but 2 was pointless, because in the mod you got didn't do anything. But yeah, Crack in Time is godly, although I probably should talk about Quest for Booty, because that game is barely a game. You can buy a physical copy for like €15 in Europe. I don't know why, but you can. But like that game, it shouldn't cost €15. It should cost like 5, maybe 4, because that game is just so short. It's so pointless, and there's nothing new about it except the wrench, which doesn't even work properly because you have to use the right analog stick. You know, the one that controls the camera. Use that to use your kinetic tether. And they fixed it in Crack in Time, where you actually, you know, you can move the wrench with it, whichever analog stick you want. But like, it was just such a pointless thing to even do. But yeah, Crack in Time, it's godly. I consider that to be my favorite because it just has so much. Because like, it just has so much. You should play it, you know, because it's good. It's a good game. I mean, there are plot holes. Like, I will not forgive that game for a couple of things, like the points where Clank is told not to alter time, and then he does without any consequence until later on where it suddenly does have consequence. Because, like, I'm spoiling things, but realistically speaking, that type of shit is irrelevant. I mean, that game was released in 2009, that's nearly, 7 years ago. So, you know, not really much of a point in talking spoilers. But, like, that game also had, like, a darker, like, a whole you are the one thing going on, but less with Ratchet and more. You know I like that game story? The Azimuth deal. I love what they did with General Azimuth, because, like, he seems like someone you shouldn't really pay attention to, because, you know, he's talking about, okay, I gotta get to the Great Clock, and then you find out he's completely insane. Like, he's been separated from his people for such a long time, he doesn't care what happens anymore, he just wants to fix things. He's been obsessing over it. And when you've beaten the game and you replay it and you know that, listening to what he says sounds a lot more insane. Like, he says stuff, come on, that's what the Great Clock was built for. Like, when you first play the game, you think it's optimistic. And then you play it again and you realize he's just desperately trying to convince himself to do something. It's rather interesting. But, yeah, I like that game a lot. I really do. When I was looking up a couple of information on the game, I heard a lot of people actually didn't like the Zoni collecting, and I'm like, what? You don't even need barely, what? Like, there's 40 Zoni in the game. I think you need about 20, 25 to get to the final area. And people are complaining about, like, oh, I need to stop and get to these. Like, Ratchet and Clank games never really had what I'd consider padding too much. And the Zoni can be considered that, but I like the Planetoids where they're on too much to even care. Plus the fucking space music is orgasmic. Like, the radio. The radio. I did not know that thing existed until my second playthrough, where I pressed the D-pad in the space missions, and it changed to, like, this beautiful disco funk, and I was like, oh my god. Because the standard music that plays during the space missions is Polaris Classical, otherwise known as the classical music radio station, where you just listen to over and over again until eventually you figure out that there's the rock station, the disco station, the tech station, the jazz station is beautiful. And there's so many different songs. Like, look up the Ratchet and Clank soundtrack. There is billions of those fucking different station songs for different sectors. It's just amazing how much effort that was put into something I didn't even realize existed until my second playthrough. But enough of the orgasm. It's time to go on for All for One. That game I hate because I hate how it looks. I hate the engine used because I don't like the new design for Ratchet in it, or any other character. I don't like the force him on a fan service by making Dr. Nefarious a playable character. I don't like the gameplay itself is a piece of shit because there's really nothing to do besides buy weapons and shoot things and use your now lazy looking grappling hook, because now it's just a beam of energy instead of an actual hook shot. It just comes out of your hand. It's such a bad game in my opinion. I don't like it at all. The story's a piece of shit too. Like, really, there's just no point to it. And then, I haven't played, that tower defense game they released. Q-Force in America. No, they called it Q-Force here. They call it Full Frontal Assault in America. Yeah, Ratchet and Clank has that whole title of a game is an innuendo, except in Europe where they decided to make it PG. We had Going Commando, Up Your Arsenal. Deadlocked, I think, is a sexual position, I believe. I don't know. We had Tools of Destruction isn't really one, but Crack in Time was supposed to be called Clock Blockers. I think All for One was supposed to be called Friends with Benefits, and Into the Nexus was called Into the Nether Regions at one point. But like, I'm not playing a tower defense game that's trying to, you know, as far as I'm aware, the game lasts about 2 hours. I'm not buying it. It costs like, what, 20-15 euro? Maybe if you feel like it, you can, but I don't give a rat's ass. And then there was Into the Nexus, which I hate simply because of how fucking painful. Like, when I saw the first trailer, I was happy because it's like, oh, now they're actually making a Ratchet and Clank game, and oh, they're referencing Crack in Time, and oh, look, it's fucking 4 hours long. Even when you get everything in it, it's 4 hours, at least 5, because I'd be, like, within 2 days, I beat that game twice recently, and it's just... The sad part is, you can tell it was meant to be full. Like, you can tell that there was development left for these people. You can tell that there was more planned. And then they just straight up ran out of ideas and decided, alright, you know what, let's just take this place and finish it and sell it for 40 euro. Like, I can't tell which is worse with that, Metal Gear Solid, Ground Zeroes, or Into the Nexus, because Into the Nexus is decent, but when you know it was meant to be like a full... Because Into the Nexus is 5 planets. It's 5 planets, and 2 of those planets aren't really planets, they're just things that you do that you can skip. But I don't think I'll ever fully enjoy those games at all because of how much it just... Like, the villains is the villains for those games is the best example I can give for underdeveloped things. Like, those characters were meant to have more, like, development. They were planning something for those guys, but there isn't. There wasn't anything. And even if there wasn't anything planned, they should have had some planned because, God forbid, I don't, like, the villains in Ratchet and Clank games aren't really played for anything. Like, Drek was humorous. There wasn't a villain in 2, and Tree just had fucking Nefarious, and he was so good they brought him back too many fucking times. Tools of Destruction had a piece of shit I don't even want to talk about, and Crack in Time had Nefarious again, but also Azimuth's crippling insanity. Well, like, you know what? I'm not even going to tell you what All for One's villain was. I'm not even going to fucking tell you. Actually, you know what I am going to tell you. It's a possessed cat. It's a possessed cat. Let that sink in for a moment there. Now, in terms of the PS4 game, now this is going to get actually interesting because those are the recently released games. Now, the PS4 game I like for being at least close to Crack in Time levels of length, because Crack in Time isn't the longest nor is it the shortest. It's like medium length, and I like that. PS4 game comes close to that, not close enough, but I still can. I can force myself to accept it. I can afford I hate Into the Nexus for even trying not to be that, but you know, I can accept the fact that at least that game tried to be longer. But like, the gameplay is the best thing about that game because the story is just and the writing is so bland, and I love Quark. He narrates, and it's beyond genius, but everything else is just meh. And God, like, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a minute here to complain about Cora Verilux's voice actor. In fact, since I'm recording this with my laptop, I'm going to specifically go. Alright, I'm going to go up, going to Google, and I'm going to look up Cora Verilux voice actor. And Google just glitched out. Wonderful. Oh my god. Someone made fan art of Cora Verlux. You know what? I'm going to actually get that picture for all of you so, you know, you can see that and just see it. Oh yeah, Bella Thorne. Bella Thorne, I think. Yep, Bella Thorne. But, Jesus. Oh, wait, no, is that the film's voice actor or... Because the film's voice actor was okay. Ish, but the game's voice actor was so bad. Like, I asked Reedy and he immediately agreed with me. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with her voice? It's so bad. But like, James Arnold Taylor's performance is good. David Kaye's performance is good. Jim Ward's performance is good. And Paul Giamatti's direct was pretty good. In terms of the film itself, I watched that once with a friend. It was lovely to see how empty the cinema was because there was literally no one there but a couple of families with their kids. And you know, it made me feel embarrassed because I just dragged another teenager into a film that literally had no one else our age in there. But like, the film was supposed to be written by T.J. Fixman, the Crack in Time writer, and they kicked him off the project, I think. They rewrote it completely, more or less. But yeah, so like we have, you know, well, you know what? One thing I always found out: why did they get Sylvester Stallone to voice the side character? How did they get Sylvester Stallone to voice the side character? But like, the story was decent. Like, it was simple. It wasn't anything more than it needed to be, and I enjoyed it for what it was. It was charming. It was charming enough. I liked it, and I liked the constant. Like, there was this guy named Wilhelm. He got blown off a bridge. He did the Wilhelm scream. Someone shouted his name. Some of you may not appreciate that, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it. But then there was the whole scene where Clank is scanning Ratchet for his species, and Daxter and Sly come up. Although humorously enough, Sly came up in his film form. That film's never happening. But like, that poor film. The film had a budget of 20 million, and its box office was, as of now, barely over half of that. I think it was, alright, you know what, let me see. 12 million. Mainly because, well, I think it wasn't advertised well, but I know that there's one thing we're going to bring up right now. It's the French version, which was, as I've mentioned previously on the podcast, oh my god, what the fuck did they do? They had, what, a YouTuber voice Ratchet, constant references to pop culture and Ratchet's YouTube channel, and, god, poor fucking bastards. Like, and of course I'm, like, very sad about, like, that the film didn't do as well as it should have. I think, like, in part, it may have had something, because, like, Ratchet and Clank wasn't, like, I mean, Ratchet and Clank was out during a time where there was, like, other family films out. Like, I think Zootopia and Jungle Book was out. That may have, killed it. And, you know, killed the turnout of the film entirely, but... God. I think Rainmaker was the one who made the film, along with Insomniac. They lost a lot of money, 7 million, I believe, and god, that film just got so many fucking bad reviews just because of how shallow it was. I like it, but fucking hell, that poor film. But yeah, there's not going to be another film, but I hope there's another PS4 game at least. I don't think there's much else to talk about. It's a box office bomb. So yeah, that was my discussion, I think. I expected it to go on for a bit longer. I wanted to talk about more, like, in depth, like, the dialogue and how fucking sharp wit I like a lot of it, but I don't know. I just don't feel like going too deep with that right now. In any case, Maybe it's because of the fact I'm doing it on my own, but thank you for watching my 40-minute video on Ratchet and Clank, and, well, goodbye.